So yeah, I kind of jumped the gun on the countdown there. I was like, we don't need that whole minute countdown there.
Fair enough.
uh,
Fair enough.
what's up, YouTube? And hello, Mark Reid. This
Hello.
it's always a special event because I don't usually do evening shows and stuff. And
Mhm.
whenever I get to thinking, hey, I want to talk to Mark Reid about this thing, I'm like, well, we'll have to get a hold of Mark and see if we can do an evening show and have this conversation.
Well, I guess yeah. So the morning is also an option, which is my evening. But like, yeah, it's kind of it's just where we are in the world. Basically, I am literally.
Oh,
Do you know anybody further away from you than I am? Like, I
no.
was wondering that. Like, yeah, like I am so far away. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, no. I think the closest the we've got. I talked to one person that's in Ukraine. Uh,
Yeah, that's pretty far. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Deviant Outcast is in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
That's
that's
true.
that's about the furthest reaches, I think. Uh,
Mm, mm.
but yeah, no, you are the furthest reach we go for here. I don't actually know if I could get much further because you're exactly 12 hours difference. So
Yes. Yep.
yeah, I think
Yep.
you would have to be the furthest.
I don't know. I mean, maybe somebody in Antarctica somewhere. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know. All right. I have no idea. No
yeah.
idea.
I
But
ha-
yeah, it's amazing that we get to talk and stuff because back in the day, we would never meet one another, much less talk to one another. Like it just wouldn't happen. So
no, and that's one of
illuminating.
the things I appreciate about this platform more than anything is just being able to connect with people all over the world. I mean,
Oh, sure.
one of the things that I often talk about in my story is like growing up here in Eastern Kentucky and feeling like I was isolated among all these other Christians and right wing folks and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
this is really my opportunity to get out and talk to people in other places that have other experiences. And
Well,
so
there is a culture shock, right? The culture shock, especially with and a lot of the times when I'm doing like I'm reviewing things or talking to people from the US, there is a culture shock with the religious culture, like the subculture kind of thing. Like I find myself occasionally going, I can't believe people actually live like this.
yeah,
Like their entire life is centered around their religion to the point of doing everything through the lens of religion. Like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
And for me, it was kind of the opposite. Whenever I discovered all this, because I was surprised that there was people whose whole life wasn't centered around religion. Uh,
really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, whenever I was growing up and even into my teens, I just expected that everybody believed the same fundamentalist creationist things that I did.
Right, right.
I thought if you were a believer, you believed in Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark and all that stuff as being actually true. And I had never met a Catholic in person until I was like a teenager. We don't have
Right.
those really here. That particular flavor. The
They're the largest religion in the US. They are the largest branch of Christianity in the US, definitely, unequivocally,
absolutely.
which is sort of weird because they're less fundamentalist than most of the evangelicals and Protestants and things, which
Yeah.
it's strange because the Protestants in England, for instance, are way less zealous than the Catholics, right? That it's the Catholics that are
Yeah.
the ones that are very strict. And then you have America where the Protestants are the ones who are like batshit crazy, basically. Like they are so strict and zealots, basically, which is the complete opposite than most. places where the Catholics are the most zealot. Uh, Strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Catholics in the United States carry a lot more power than the Protestants, at least in some areas. Um, the
Okay.
but you know, like here, it's Southern Baptist fundamentalist, and they pretty much hate Catholics. Uh,
Right.
yeah, it's you don't get a lot of mingling of various religions. Now that being said, they did recently just open up like a Mormon church here locally, which is new. I'd never.
They're uniting to hate on the Mormons. Is that what's happening?
I
Because,
mean, I'm sure they have.
yeah, look, I and Southern Baptists. That's one of the flavors that they will say Catholics aren't real Christian. They're not really Christian. They're completely. They're not. They don't count as Christian. But what I've noticed is when it comes to, well, you know, are Christians the majority of people in America? They're happy to claim them. Then there is this. Um, it's almost like a utilitarian, it's a pragmatic approach to who is a Christian. Because if they're like, well, who is right and who has the truth, they're not Christian. But if it's who has the majority in the country and therefore the most power, suddenly they're Christian and they count as Christians. There's, all these Christians in America, so you've got to listen to us, basically. But they don't agree on anything.
Yeah, yeah. No, one of the first arguments I often get from especially fundamentalists is, well, Christians make up this huge part of their population. There's so many of them,
Yep.
and it's the number one religion in the world. And I'm like, well, are Catholics Christians? No. Are Mormons Christians? No. Like,
Right.
oh well, you're
Right.
like number 4 or 5 now. So it, yeah, it's strange how they do that. They'll stand in solidarity whenever it's convenient.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
which is kind of relates to some of the stuff I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
So I haven't been doing now. I've mingled in some debates and stuff. Like did some got around and did some debates with some fundamentalists and various people and
I'm
had,
sorry. I'm
yeah,
sorry. That's
yeah,
that's terrible. I'm sorry. I feel for
yeah.
you.
Um, I mean, I sat down with Kent Hovind twice in less than 6 months. So, um, but it's like as I got into doing a political show, and I make a lot of political content from an atheist perspective,
Right, right.
because Christian nationalism is a big part of it here in the U.S. And
It's a problem.
yeah, definitely. Uh, but one of the things I started to notice, especially as um, all of these awful things came out about the Epstein files and everything here, is the Christian following was okay with all this stuff. And
Sure.
I started to question, and I was like, well, you know, are these those conservative Christian values they're always talking about? And and instead of just calling them conservative Christian values, let's identify what those are. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that rather than having the usual like moral argument where we're talking about subjective and objective morality and things of that sort, I realized that ethics and values, especially values, were something that were more obvious to me as a problem. And I felt like that the values that the apologists especially will yell the loudest about and stuff are not actually the values that they practice or support. They claim to support those, but when you actually get into, well, do you prefer this thing, whether it be politically or in some other vein, you find out that, oh, you don't actually support that thing you claim to support. A good example would be with abortion, for example. They'll say, well,
Sure.
that's the life of a child, but as soon as that child's born, they don't care to starve them to death, if especially if it's a poor family. Um,
Right.
and so I see this mismatch of what is purported Christian values versus the actual values that individuals hold. Not just Christians. I mean, everybody kind of makes their own moral framework based on how they prioritize different values.
Mm.
And that's been a real sticking point of things where I've kind of like found a different way to engage, not necessarily have debates and stuff. It's just I have an agenda at times whenever I'm having this conversation of, okay, you want to bring up, morality in the Bible. Let's look at values, which is kind of what a product of morality, I guess. Would you call it?
I don't think so. I think your values, like what you hold to be valuable, will sort of go into your morality. So, um, that. So really, you will have these core beliefs, and from those core beliefs you will have certain values that you have or you don't have, and that's sort of a meta ethical thing. So it's sort of, your goals and what you're trying for, or what you hold to be important to you, basically. And I think that morality is the way you go about achieving those values. So, like, there's so much to unpack in what you've just said. There's so much, because I think you're right. I think that um, morality to some is just a means to an end, and I get that. And whether or not the value of, say, human life, for instance, right? And the abortion thing that you mentioned, like, once they're born, they don't seem to give a shit, right? I think to some, and when we're talking about Christians, there's such a wide array of Christians. We've got to remember that.
Yeah,
Um, but really, we're focusing on the right wing, extreme, Christian fundamentalists, right? The MAGA Christian fundamentalists who are ride or die, Trump and his entire agenda.
yeah,
Um, and to a lesser degree, the right wing fundamentalists. But there's plenty of Christians that do care that children are starving, that SNAP benefits have been, destroyed and stuff like that. There's plenty of them that do care. But what we're seeing is a large amount of those right wing fundamentalists that just do not care. Um, I think that this goes into a whole swath of political stuff, rather than, it's not theology, it's political. That, this whole replacement theory, well, we've got to have more children, which started with the quiverful, if you remember that, the Mormons having more and more children because they wanted as many beliefs as kids as possible to be believers, so basically the kids are weapons, right? Like, think
yeah,
about that. What they're seeing with Quiverful is that the children aren't, individual human beings that you want to raise to critically think about the world and, take society into the next generation. They are weapons to be shot at your opponents, right? Like, the dehumanizing of sort of going, well, these children are my ammo for my bow,
yeah,
is pretty horrendous. And um, the so really what they're doing is basically looking upon children as a means to an end, a way to promote and enforce their religion through democracy. Right, because replacement theory sort of says, hey, they're bringing in immigrants to replace us. There's this white, the white majority. And don't forget that Christianity, and it's really important to understand the history of Christian sort of the sort of one color sort of Christians have been in charge because it's been 90% Christian, at some points in the history. Now it's gone down to 70% or whatever. It's and if you look at other countries, Christianity's just fallen off the perch, right?
Yeah.
If you look at Australia, and this is one of the things that was brought up, I think it was Andrew Wilson, who's a complete douchebag. He's like, "Oh, I couldn't believe that Christianity went from 60 to 40%, over the last 20 years." Yeah, it did. It absolutely fell off, and
Yeah.
they're staring down the barrel of, well, um, you know, we don't have this monopoly on the moral landscape anymore. Being a Christian, it used to be, well, if you're a good Christian, you just get out of trouble. The judge looks favorably. All of this power that to do whatever you want because you're a good Christian is going to go out the door. And, God forbid they judge you on your character and what you have done rather than your religious belief. We can't have that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think a lot of it is this sort of paranoia that the power and the high moral position they've been sitting on is gonna go.
Yeah.
It's gonna leave. Like they're so worried about it.
Well, so just real quick, let me do this before I forget. Justin Yahooligan, 13-month membership. Thanks, Justin, for supporting the channel for 13 months. I really
Don't
appreciate
acknowledge him. Don't acknowledge him.
it. Yeah.
No, don't. Justin's my favorite Canadian. Like I love Canadians, and Justin's my favorite. So don't.
Yeah.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, no. Justin, I have a lot of fun talking with Justin as well. Justin's
Mm,
he he he'll let on like he's not going to have an intellectual conversation with you, and then he gets into it. And Justin's a deeper thinker than he lets on.
oh yeah, he's sneaky. He's sneaky. Yeah.
And Dave Murphy dropped a $2 super chat that says situational ethics informs my morality. Sure. And thank you, Dave, for that $2 super chat. I understand your point. So the thing that really caught my attention, though, it wasn't so much that it's, and I mean, there is a political tie to this, but for me here, I'm having a problem these days differentiating between where politics and religion, where one stops and the other starts. It's becoming
Right.
harder to identify, and it feels more like their politics is just the thing that has exposed this. Like it's and I don't know that it's always rooted in politics, and I definitely would never try to put like all Christians in one box and say that Christians are doing this awful thing.
Right. Right. Right.
It's definitely on an individual basis, but it's something that I've been coming across more and more, where and I find myself often whenever I have these interactions that I'll be the one that'll bring up something. Well, the Bible that you like to toss around quite often says this other thing, like
Right.
we're doing all this thing with immigrants. Let's talk about the story of the stranger from the Bible. Do you not hold to those things?
Mm.
And and that's kind of like it's become this thing that I can't that I always just recognize it immediately anymore, because it is so, I guess it's becoming just so out in the open. They don't care at all that they're being contradictory to their purported values, or to, they'll say I value the Ten Commandments and these things. Well, let's talk about that. And
Right.
you end up finding out that that's not really the case. And it's it's not a thing to be like, oh, haha, look at you, you're a hypocrite.
Mm.
That's not really, because I don't think they realize it often whenever this happens. Like, and I
Yeah.
hate to keep using the they thing, but um, I mean, within this subject, it's that it's often the ones that are the first to say, well, Christian values, and I support these things because I'm a Christian and I believe in God and the
Right,
Bible and what the Bible says.
right.
And then it's like, oh well, you know, I happen to notice your your political leanings right, and you support this thing, or you look over this thing. How do you reconcile that? Like, and really, I've yet to get any answers.
Yeah, and that's when the anger will start. That's when they will start to usually what I've found when looking at like just the average Christian who believes this stuff yet is happy to endorse Trump kind of thing. Because this happened before the Epstein files, like he had
Sure.
those comments on the bus saying, grab him by the pussy kind of thing. And, even from that point, the Christians you would think would stand up and go, "Hey, that's absolutely reprehensible." Like if you've committed adultery if you look upon them with lust in your heart, much less grab them by something. You know what I mean? Like it really
Yeah.
is a horrible, odious, immoral to Christians things that he said all throughout it, and his behaviour all throughout. His entire campaigns have been atrocious. And you're sitting there going, how, as a Christian, can you endorse this guy? I think that a lot of the blame has to go to the leaders and the people they follow who used sort of these. I mean, it's almost like apologetics, right? It's these excusegetics to sort of go, oh, well, he's being used by God, but he is a good person. And one thing I've noticed about the Christian sort of online sphere is that their followers will really follow what they say without really critically thinking about whether what they say actually makes sense. It is
Yeah.
this, well, we're brethren, we all come together and support the church, and my pastor says this guy is going to revive Christianity, so let's go. And they don't actually look at things. They don't actually, like, they really just see somebody walk the walk, or they see somebody sort of, make the right things, say the right things, and they will just go along with it because their pastor is like, oh, this is God's will. They don't challenge whether the behaviors of candidate A will, likely lead to outcome B.
Yeah.
So when you look at someone who has, I want to say, co-opted the entire Christian infrastructure for his own ends, like Trump, right? He has co-opted them essentially. Will what Trump is doing lead to a greater America? No. And no rational person would say that what he is doing is going to lead to that outcome. Especially after his first term, where he absolutely screwed up nearly everything he touched. Like, he absolutely was terrible. Is that going to lead to it? But they don't question it.
Yeah.
Their leaders just say, hey, this is going to lead to. And so I've been saying lately a few times that we cannot let Christians off the hook for what happens with this guy. Like what the outcomes, the stuff. Because at the moment, we're getting the most atrocious news about, war crimes and embezzling and corruption and all this stuff that's coming out from this administration. And this is while the administration's in power. Like, I think that they've done way worse than the stuff that's been leaked. And it
Oh,
just
sure.
hasn't,
Yeah.
they've just kept a lid on it because they're the ones in power. It is absolutely horrifying. And we cannot let Christian, individual Christians, can you really blame them? A little bit, I guess, but really their leaders at this is your Christian utopia. People being shot on the streets is your Christian utopia.
Right, yeah, yeah, and that's kind of that's where a lot of this comes from, is because it's like, well, you have this the church, specifically the right wing Christians that are all about Trump, has, spent so much time going on about they support this and not this, and all these things. And then whenever it's like, oh well, we're doing this to immigrants, we're doing this to American citizens,
Yeah.
we're in a fight with the Pope, like, all of these things. And it's like, do you support those things? And then whenever the answer is yes, and it's like, well, how do you get there? And how do you get to the point to where you are willing to give up these things from your favorite book here, and you support this other thing that is exactly the opposite of what you've always stated you support? And it's like, I kind of then go back and say, well, you know you always want to bring up, and this is talking with an apologist. You bring up all of these things about the Bible, and so, that's the source for all of this. And whenever I ask the question, should we trust what the Bible says? Should we trust those words? And whenever I see you doing this, um, I don't think that you even trust those words. And it's,
Right.
and it kind of demonstrates that, I think, what's going on now. And it's often political, not always, but it's often political, I think, paints that picture. And, it's kind of something that I've just picked up on, and been throwing around a lot lately. But
Well, it's
yeah,
even worse because, I mean, you'll see these people try to co-opt all morality, all society, all laws, everything in the name of Christianity. I mean, I was seeing, I think it was Joel Sedekase. He's a weird guy. He was basically trying to say, oh, all of our values are based upon Christianity, like all of our values. And when you're talking about liberal values, so modern liberalism,
yeah,
um, the idea that your values are based upon Christianity. I mean, the very one of the core concepts of liberalism is freedom of religion. You get to choose what religion you want, and there's nowhere in Christianity that is the case, right? The
right,
very first commandment that they keep referring to is, honor the Lord thy God. There is no other God but him. Basically, you can't have another religion. That is the very first fundamental law, Mosaic law of the Ten Commandments. Like it's not even up for debate, but that is completely antithetical to the idea that your religion should be entirely up to your own conscience and nobody should interfere with your right to choose your religion unless you're harming somebody else. Right? That's a core concept of our societies.
yeah,
But that's not the way they still want to claim all of that, rich history of, freedom, liberalism, personal rights, and claim that all comes from Christianity, and it doesn't. It doesn't.
yeah,
I was watching a debate recently. We're doing a review with Better Than Ember, of Alex O'Connor versus Glenn Scrivener, and they're talking about this. Like, does is do we owe our civilization to Christianity? And I don't think so. I would more like to say that, hey, Christianity has had no influence on our modern society is absolutely a lie. Like that is ridiculous. Of course it has,
right,
for good and for ill, as far as I'm concerned. But absolutely. But that doesn't mean we owe everything to Christianity and they get to dictate what is moral and what is not moral, because that seems to be the tack that I see these Christian leaders going for. It's, yeah, we'll support this guy's doing these horrible things, we'll support this, but morality and our Western civilization owes itself to Christianity, so we're allowed to do
Yeah.
that. You
Right.
know, it's
No,
this.
I agree.
And I would argue that the Enlightenment has had more of an influence on Christianity, and there is nothing more absurd than Christians trying to claim the Enlightenment that I have ever seen. You know, when really the Enlightenment was a rejection of the Christian institutions of the time, most notably the Catholic Church, and saying, hey, we want explanations for things that aren't just God. We can't use God as an explanation. Let's find other explanations than God did it.
Yeah.
Because that was the answer for it through the Dark Ages. If you want to know why bread rose, or the sun shone, or the moon had a certain cycle, it was God. God decided it. That was the answer. It was only when we broke out of that appeal to a divine will that we started to question, have science, find actual naturalistic explanations. Even if some of the people that were doing that were Christian, they were like, yes, we're Christian, but we're going to search for naturalistic explanations for things. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
sorry.
no, well, it sort of follows then to the French Revolution, right, where they overthrew the Catholic Church working with the aristocracy. So the aristocrats were basically propped up by the church, whether that be the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church in England, and the French Revolution was an overthrow of that.
Yeah.
Now, they sometimes sort of say, well, all of that was violence, and the reign of terror and things like that. And it's like, well, it was actually Robespierre, the main guy who did the reign of terror. He wasn't an atheist. He
Right.
was he was a deist.
Yeah. 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 I mean, they eventually realized the Catholic Church was the problem, so to
Yeah,
speak. The well, I think even on a like a less tangible level, here in the United States, we have the history of chattel slavery here, where it was at one time uh, propped up by Christianity, and they used the Bible and their belief system to say that we could and should have slaves in the United States, and then later the abolitionist movement then uses the Bible and their faith to say that we shouldn't.
sure.
And anytime you have one of these things where a moral we come to some moral conclusion that happens to cross paths with the ideals of a religion, that religion immediately wants to claim it, right? So like
Right,
the Ten Commandments, they're like, oh no, we invented laws, like
right.
obviously they didn't.
Yeah,
And society continues to advance its moral framework in spite of religions, not because of it. And go ahead.
well, I think that so society is influenced by a whole bunch of influences, and that's not a bad thing. And of course, Christianity has contributed towards it, but that doesn't mean anybody owns it, or you get exclusive rights to decide what it is. No, we take it on from a whole range of different sources. I don't know why you would just go, well, it's all Christianity, unless you're living in that, you're swimming in that pond of, like you said, you were. Everybody believes that the ark was real, that the earth is 10,000 years old, and that Christianity gives you all more laws, morals, science, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. The so the okay, so and I'm sure you've came across this in moral conversations with apologists, where it'll be something to the effect of, well, you have some kind of moral framework, and you have that because you've borrowed it, or you've taken it from Christianity,
Right.
and it's like, well, are we not going to look at where it came from before that, because Christianity isn't the beginning of morality. Like that's a silly thing to even suggest. Like before Moses went
Mm.
up on the mountain, if we're giving that's true. Um, Before Moses goes up on the mountain, people knew not to kill each other.
Right.
They knew not to steal each other's things. They didn't need that to happen, because this is something that was already occurring. So to say that we only have those things because Christianity, or that Christianity is the main influence here, just because you were right about a thing doesn't mean that it's the primary influence for all things that
Right.
share that same ideal.
Yeah, I mean the Bhagavad Gita is a older holy book, and that has morals in it, like virtues on what to live, things that you should do, selflessness and purity of body and all kinds of stuff in it. So we know that that's not the case. It just seems to be sort of what their leaders are purporting in order to seize that sort of moral high ground in order to say, hey, we've got moral authority. And I think a lot of it is that they have this nostalgia for when the church did have moral authority, when they could just come down and say, "Hey, if you go against the church, you're excommunicated, you're a sinner, and your life is over."
Yeah,
Because the Catholic Church used to have the ability to excommunicate people, including leaders they didn't like. They really wielded this incredible power to say you're a good person or you're a bad person.
right,
Instead of us going, well, are your actions harming people or helping people? It used to be that are you aligned with the church or not aligned with that? That shows whether you're a good or a bad person. And even while they are doing inquisitions and things and just torturing innocent people for their own good, and I think a lot of it is that they want this power to, and like I was saying before, even maybe 100 years ago, for instance, if you weren't a Christian, you weren't a good person. You were sort of seen as I mean, America was significant because the founding fathers, a lot of them weren't Christian. They were sort of deist or some of them atheist, and nobody seemed to. That was an anomaly, and it would have been an anomaly sort of before the Enlightenment kind of thing. Like Dark Ages, you weren't a good person if you weren't a Christian.
right.
Like it was in Europe, I guess. Of course, I'm not speaking about. I'm really talking about Western civilization, just by the by. So yeah, it's kind of this. Well, we want to go back to that. We have the moral high ground when what we have seen is that when they lose the moral high ground, we have people leaving churches, people not contributing to the religion. I know that like part of my family, my brother's family, is very Catholic, but the things that happened in the Catholic Church absolutely rocked them, right? The pedo priests absolutely like that shattered them, right? And they also had a problem with women aren't allowed to be priests,
Yeah,
just for reasons, right? Because apparently women just can't be priests, and they've always had a problem with it. But that scandal, like they really stopped going to church, kind of thing, after that, and only on special occasions like Christmas and things. Like they really went, and for a family that devout. And there's the cognitive dissonance, right? And we can't talk about this without bringing up cognitive dissonance. Are
absolutely.
you familiar with that?
Yes, yes,
Well, just for the people at home, cognitive dissonance is trying to hold two ideas that conflict in your mind. And we see a lot of stuff from this. We see, so like for instance, if you want to say, oh, well, um, God is all good and loves you and does all these things, but God ordered all of the Amalekites to be slaughtered, kind of thing. They're two ideas that really jar against one another. And cognitive dissonance produces, a lot of deconstruction, because you have these two ideas and, you sort of go, that's not what cognitive dissonance says. Well, Maya is a psychologist, so I would trust her. Um, the mental discomfort experienced when holding two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or attitudes when behavior conflicts, or when behavior conflicts with beliefs. So I don't see how I've got it wrong. I don't see how I've got it wrong, but there you go. Well, yeah, I mean it's the discomfort. That's what I'm talking about. It's that. Didn't I say a jarring feeling, Maya? You're just telling me what I've already said. So it's that jarring feeling of holding two conflicting ideas in your head. So it produces anger. That's what I've noticed. Like when somebody really, like you pointed out, and you start to bring it up, that feeling um, will um, will produce a lot of anger in people. So I think that um, the problem comes that the leaders have latched on to that jarring feeling, or that sort of cognitive, and they've aimed it at, oh, that liberal's making you think that way, that lefty is making you feel that way, that they're or aim it towards something else. They're just sort of weaponizing anger towards people that have got nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this all the time.
Yeah. And I would say that the whenever you get into the apologetics, and especially some of the weaker arguments where it's like just making excuses for why they have these two conflicting ideals, that's the product of that discomfort, right? So like
Mm.
that that
Yeah,
is that is the thing driving some of those excuses and things that are made for how they're holding those two things. Uh,
yeah.
the Real quick, just because we have someone here who does oppose what we're saying, and I feel like this is kind of a common thing that's said. Um, Roman Catholics Exposed said overlap in moral content reflects natural law grasped by reason. Convergence in teaching does not mean parity in grounding. Only a necessary being secures objective moral truth across systems.
No, I would absolutely like so. When you're sort of saying only a necessary being secures objective moral truth, so you're really talking about moral facts, right? Like objective moral truths are moral facts. They're facts independent of any stance, basically. The problem comes that I don't think there are moral facts. Like you've got to show there's moral facts first. Like you've got to show it's objective first, right? Like because you're sitting there going, well, I have objective morality and you don't, but you can't show that morality is objective. That's the problem, right? So you're saying, it's like saying, well, I have a unicorn and you don't. That's only true if unicorns actually exist. If they
Right.
don't exist, then you're in trouble. You've got nothing, right? Like whether or not there is objective morality is not whether you can explain it comes from a place. I will note that there are atheists that appeal to, say, evolutionary process, natural law. They appeal to objective morality from other sources. Now, I don't think there is objective morality, and they have the same problem. They've got to show that, for instance, evolution produces some sort of objective morality, or whether evolution has a number of things we can do, and we're still making subjective choices in how we want to proceed. So the problem is that you're saying it grounds it, but it doesn't, because you can't ground the God. You can't show the God. You can't demonstrate the God. So without being able to show and demonstrate your grounding, it's an assertion, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If
I
I
would
can,
have said you're trying to smuggle in your presupposition here, and then
oh
make
yeah, it's
something
presup,
about
yeah.
it. Yeah,
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 it is presupposition. So you're presupposing the God and saying, well, we have these common moral values. I'm going to presuppose they come from a God. Like, that's not how anything works. I can't just say, um, um, you know, I have this coffee. I'm going to presuppose it comes from Bill, the coffee maker, and therefore it's Bill the coffee maker has to be real. That's ludicrous. That's ridiculous. Moral facts are bedrock data. Torturing innocents for fun is as evident as 2 + 2 = 4. Well, it's not just that it has to be wrong by everybody. Even if everybody agrees on something subjective, like everybody agrees that ice cream is nice, does that make it objective? No, it doesn't. Right? Like, that's the thing. Just because you have everybody agrees on it doesn't mean it's objective. Because everyone agrees that ice cream is really nice. It
yeah.
doesn't mean that it's evident as an objective fact.
I think you. I think in this case you're kind of conflating torturing with just harming, because you say torturing innocents for fun. Torturing anybody is going to be harmful to them, and they're not. It's going to harm a person to torture them. So to say it's wrong when actually what you mean is it's harmful, right? And should we harm people? And that goes back to uh, uh, to a place to where you don't have to use moral objectivity to know that a thing is harmful.
Well, I will say this. Mark treats moral claims as truth apt when arguing. Yes, but I only treat them as truth apt in virtue of the goal that you're trying to get to, right? So basically, it means, and this goes into meta ethics, right? Which, if you're unfamiliar with that, meta ethics is basically what you're aiming for in your morality. So I only treat torturing people for fun is wrong in virtue of the goal of getting to human well being. I
Right.
can say that torturing people for fun will be detrimental to the achieving the goal of human well-being. It will be, I think you and I could agree that torturing people for fun will not will we be antithetical to getting to that human well-being. That will not increase human well-being. While not torturing them, that's better for human well-being. Okay, so I only consider it truth apt in virtue of that goal. That goal is the thing that is not truth apt. That I'm
Absolutely.
not saying it is true that that morality, and this is what Sam Harris does, and I disagree with Sam Harris on this. He says that morality is human or automatically the goal of human well-being, and I don't think there is anything. I think he has smuggled an ought in there where he hasn't, that it ought to be human well-being that is our goal. I don't think that is objective, right? I think that is a intersubjective agreement among humans that because we're humans, we have the stance that human well-being is important. And it's important to have our societies run well, have humans flourish, have people living relatively well. I think that is a subjective thing. So, but it's objective that torturing people for fun will be detrimental to human well-being.
Right. And the point I was making with harmful and torture is that the you say it's wrong, but I'm saying the reason at which people arrive for why it's wrong varies. Some people think it's wrong because God tells you not to do it. some people think it's wrong because it's harmful to human beings, and they hold a humanist position about it. There can be various reasons whenever you say torturing people, because you're talking about harming humans, and so there can be more than one reason why it's wrong. So it's not just an objective thing that it's wrong, because there's more to it than that. And Mark brought up meta ethics, so you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I will just say he's trying to claim that I'm smuggling in well-being as a standard, needs grounding, et cetera, et cetera. That is simply grounded in empiricism. It's empirical data. Like if
yeah,
I can take somebody's temperature, read their pulse, so see what their heart rate is, do a number of tests on their body mass, how much, body fat index, and we can tell objectively whether someone's suffering from malnutrition or suffering from an illness and things like that. Secondarily, we can tell through a number of scientific means whether somebody's mental well-being is bad or not, right? Right, we can tell this. So no, I'm not smuggling in well-being as some nebulous idea. If you can agree that doctors can see how healthy you are, then that's not my subjective opinion. Okay, there's nothing subjective about that. If a child is dying of malnutrition, it's not a subjective opinion. It is a empirical, objective thing that they are not getting enough food, or they're being treated badly, or their mental health is terrible. That's not a stance dependent thing,
yeah.
right? It's not my stance that, hey, you know, Kevin says they are getting enough food. I say they're not. Whoa, it's all up to whatever you believe. No, that's not. That's not what we're talking about. So, no, you don't understand the is ought gap of Hume, okay? Because I'm not doing an is ought, right? Stop bringing up Hume, because you're absolutely wrong. So Hume's guillotine basically says that just because something is just because there is human well-being in the world, doesn't mean we ought to go towards that. And I'm not making that claim. Okay, I'm saying if you care about human well-being, then you should do these things. Then you ought to do these things, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying hey, that is automatically human well-being, is automatically your goal. I'm saying if you care about the well-being of humans and society, then you ought to do these things. It's an if ought, not is.
Skeptic philosophy makes a great point. If you think well-being needs grounding, change well-being out for God wants it, and tell me what changed. How is it grounded because God wants it? That's a great point. Um,
Well, if God wants it and he, just says, "Hey, that's what morality is," then it's still subjective. The
yeah,
subject is a God, but it's still just his stance. So,
right. Well, this is that thing that I'm talking about, where we come across
mm,
a thing where we agree that harming people is bad for, but that's not the basis of the moral framework. It's why is this going on? And whenever you say, like, is it wrong because God wants it? Is it wrong because it's harmful to humans? That's where the morality is based. The harm that you're doing to the person, that is objective. If you're torturing someone, you're harming them. It's in the definition of torturing. So yeah, that's the
well,
point that I would try to, yeah.
okay, so what I've loved about this is Godwin's law comes up. No matter how long an argument takes, you're eventually one person's going to compare the other one to the Nazis, basically. That's
Right.
Godwin's law, right? It's basically a thing of eventually someone's going to bring it up because they're losing the argument, essentially. They're going to bring up comparing you to Hitler. Hitler didn't believe in human well-being. He believed in establishing the Third Reich, right? He believed that only Aryan people, which, I mean, the stupidity of this World War II German guy. I mean, did you know that Aryan is an actual language group? It's not even an ethnic group. Like, it is so stupid. It is such a stupid ideology that they got a language group and went, oh yes, Scandinavian people and all the blue-eyed, that they speak the Aryan group of languages. That's an ethnic group, when it's not. right? Like it's not even an ethnic group. So, but they believed in the superiority of the German model, whereas I don't believe that, right? Like I don't. In fact, I think Australians, quite frankly, are inferior to just about everybody else. You know, like seriously. I mean, come on. Let's face it. This is the thing. You're comparing apples with oranges. You're sort of saying, hey, Nazis believed the same thing. No, Nazis were not after human well-being. Like, I mean, come on, seriously. If you're going to be arguing that, you're tripping. Seriously.
See, I feel like whenever we say things like torturing people for fun, comparing people to Nazis, harming babies is often one that's used. That you're trying to just appeal to people's emotions to make your point. Whenever what you're really talking about is should we harm people or should we not harm people? And if we're talking about whether it's well-being or because that's God's creation or God tells you not to, it's the reasoning behind that explains what the actual moral framework is. Because whenever you say, well, it's because it's God's created being, well, then it's not because of the well-being of those people that you shouldn't harm them. You shouldn't harm them because God said not to do it. So what you're
Well, there's
saying
a
is
problem there.
actually the moral basis for that. Like,
Well, there's a problem there, right? Like if you have two people that both say, "Well, we're after human well-being," one person says, "Well, I've got to torture these people for fun. That will get me to human well-being," and the other person says, "Oh, we've got to feed and clothe them to get them to human well-being." We have a methodology for finding out who is right. Okay, we can look at, hey, what happens to people that are tortured for fun? Will that lead to their well-being? And everyone and anybody who has studied biology or sociology or just has a brain in their head will go, no, that won't get to human well-being. But just say you have two people who say, well, God says that we've got to torture people for fun, and the other says God says that we should feed and clothe people. What's your methodology for finding out who's right?
yes, I love it.
How do you determine who's right? How do you determine who is correctly reflecting God? Right? So if you've got a bunch of Christians who are going, hey, let's go over and bomb, a country because they're a threat and God doesn't want them and they're Muslims or whatever, and you've got a bunch of people that is like, no, we shouldn't bomb people, God is peaceful. How do you evaluate which one is that? Because I know how, like with that exact same situation, a bunch of secular humanists are going, hey, for human well-being, we should go and bomb this country. And a bunch of them going, hey, we shouldn't bomb the country because that's bad for human well-being. We have a way. It's called science, evaluation. Like human well-being is not just people's preference. Like if people are going to be killed en masse from that bombing, we probably shouldn't do it.
Well, yeah, and we get into empathy then too as well, right? And empathy is grounded has an evolutionary grounding as well. Now, whether
Yes.
it's developed, for what reason, I can't tell you, but I'm sure that
Pro-social behavior.
yeah, I'm sure an evolutionary biologist or an anthropologist could give you a better response as to what the purpose is of it. But yeah,
Well, I mean, it's imperative. So we have sort of social species, but we have eusocial species. Like we have humans are a ultra social, like a eusocial, ultra social species. Like they are so social that without social interaction, we will kind of break down, right? Like we will kind of go strange and have detrimental effects. People that are isolated and do not have any contact will start to talk to objects and they will hallucinate that those objects reply to them.
Yeah.
right? Like this is a documented thing, and they sort of make use of it in certain movies, like for instance, Castaway, where he has Wilson, the volleyball kind of thing. We will socially imprint upon objects. There's been
Psycho.
instances. Sorry,
Psycho would an
no,
example.
no.
No, the movie Psycho was
Oh,
the example I was using, where
yeah,
he talks
that's
with
not
this
exactly
other.
the same. Yeah, that's not exactly the same. But like we have had instances where people that have been isolated for long times have been talking to the sun, or talking to a tree, or talking to something. We're that social that we need that social interaction in
Yeah,
order to be human, basically.
yeah,
And so you've got two main factors as the basis for interaction with other humans, and these pro-social behaviors as opposed to anti-social behaviors, behaviors that will break down the social cohesion of you with other humans. So you've got empathy, of course, yes, understanding how the other person is feeling. But there's two types of empathy. There's affective empathy, and there is cognitive empathy, right? So there's the idea that, hey, I can understand how they're feeling cognitively. Like you can go, yeah, okay, that would upset me if I was to, he stole my food. Yeah, oh, sorry, I stole his food. He was upset. I can understand that through, intellectual processing. But effective empathy is more that, seeing a person lose a loved one and they break down crying, and you actually feel sad. Like you feel what they're feeling. You like, not in the same way, of course, but you feel that thing, right? Like it's not like a, hey, I would understand how they're sad. It is, you get that secondhand emotion. Um, so that's empathy. The other one is reciprocity, basically the idea of fairness, right?
yeah,
And we see this in animals, social animals, all the time. That like the monkey that doesn't, like, loses their crap because their friend is getting grapes and they're not. They're getting cucumber or something. And we've done these studies that show, if things aren't equal, animals lose their crap. So
yeah,
those are the two bases, I think, for morality. The idea that understanding how the other person feels, and having a sense of things being fair between them. Um, some people argue that that is a form of morality. I wouldn't. I think those are the foundations of morality, but it is not morality itself, because morality to me is a sort of a code of conduct, which empathy,
yeah,
it doesn't tell you, it's not a code of how to behave. It just is, oh well, Joe's really upset and I feel upset for him. I can understand how he's upset, but more than that, effective empathy is, I feel him upset. I'm upset that he's upset. You know what I mean? Like it's that feeling. And I always wonder if you explain that to somebody incapable of empathy, like a psychopath, for instance, right? Like someone with psychopathy, whether they would even understand what you're talking about.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
I've often wondered.
yeah, and I'm just gonna sum up the rest of that there as you said it about presupposing well-being and stuff. That's the exact thing that we were trying to tell you isn't the case.
Right.
It's not always for well-being. Like there's different reasoning behind it. Now, to the individual, of course, they care for their well-being, and again, you get into like evolutionary reasons for that. But
Hmm.
then do these things, these social hierarchies, I guess, do they arise because of those evolutionary changes, or uh, there's a lot to get into as far as like the biological reason for those things. But yeah, that we were actually talking about the very opposite. Roman Catholic. That the well being isn't the presupposed thing, and that's why it's not
Correct.
objective.
Well, the presupposed thing may be something. And look, if somebody has a morality that, because I'm not looking to say, hey, you've got to have the same morality as that I do. And I've stated this very often. I'm looking for compatibility, moral compatibility. So if you are a Christian and you believe that God says that human well-being is important, great. We can have a conversation. We can say, hey,
Yeah.
what leads to human well-being? What takes away from it? We can then have a conversation about how we evaluate that. Like what if we're talking about cigarettes, for instance, like whether children should be able to smoke, we can have what leads to these children being well, what leads to them not being well. Are they going to, does these things have any harmful effect? Do we need to take them out? We can have a conversation from that point, right? But when your moral objective is, say, the glory of God, I don't know how we then proceed to have a conversation about what gets us to any goal, because
Well,
your glory of God is completely different than any other denominations. Like what you think, not only how you get there, but also the goal of this God is completely and utterly different.
yeah. I mean, we may have shared values, which is great. But then,
Yeah,
whenever we have a discussion about the basis for why we each may have that value, that's where you
right.
start to get into the differences. Like,
Yeah.
and whenever you give these big overarching thing about torturing people and stuff, you're like, we share that value. I agree with you, and it's a point for us to start talking, and it's great that we share that value. But
Yeah.
why two people share that value may not be compatible,
Mhm.
and that's where you get into why it can't be objective.
But that's when you start to hear some horrible stuff, some really
Absolutely.
horrible stuff. Because I've been in debates with Christians that have said, "Well, if I didn't have God, I would just murder everybody around me." And like I honestly was like that was on, I think, Modern Day Debate. They get some real kooky people over there,
Yeah.
and I had to stop and say, well, that's horrifying, but at the same time, I don't think I believe him. Right? I think he's been told that, and this goes back to what their leaders say. How they are using their flock to not think critically, but rather just follow what they say. And they've sort of told their people again and again, well, if you didn't have God, you would just be a murdering, horrible person, just harming everybody around you. But I don't believe that would be the case,
No, I
right?
don't.
I think that most people would, they wouldn't, if they didn't have God, they wouldn't just, kill their children or kill their wife or just, go out and murder the next person they saw. I don't think they would do that. I think that it would still be important that they had a job and made money and had a reasonably comfortable life and took care of their children and took care of their wife and all of that kind of stuff. It's only sort of a real, like, damaged psychopath that or sociopath that would do something like that, because you still, like, but they keep telling their followers this. Without God, you've got no morals and you just do anything, and you're a terror to society. That is not what we have seen, especially in the countries that are very irreligious, like, for instance, the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, all of these countries. People are living normal, happy, everyday lives. They just don't believe in religion. Australia is very irreligious. We don't have a huge murder rate. It's not going off the chain. Like, we've got problems, don't get me wrong. Every country's got problems, and bad things are happening, sure. But, if that were true, if you didn't have God and suddenly you would just go around destroying everybody, then these countries would be utter chaos, and they're not. It's a lie. It's a lie that these people have been told, and they believe it. They absolutely believe that if they didn't have God, they would be the most horrible person on the face of the planet.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's sad. That's sad.
yeah. I mean, you'll often get to a point sometimes in these conversations like that where, and again, this goes back to the well, they want to bring up like harming children or something, and then you talk about the harm that comes to children every day worldwide, and they'll turn around and say that that's good because it's part of God's plan. Um,
Yes.
and it's, again, that goes back to that thing about why you hold that value isn't the same reason that I do. And the
Right.
uh, as to, and we'll close this here with you, Roman Catholic, as far as like arguing about it through the chat. um,
Yeah.
Christianity
Look.
grounds why that denial is objectively wrong. Christianity claims
Yes.
to hold it. And that's the thing I was talking about earlier, is where Christianity decides to say, well, we own this thing. We have the answer to this thing, when it's really just a claim. Yeah,
And I will say, look, Roman Catholics, I debate. I'm, if you're respectful, I will be respectful. We can have a debate if you're really, I'm happy to have you on. I'm sure Joe would moderate a debate. You could find a moderator if you want. I don't mind. I'm always looking for debate. So if you do want to discuss it, I'm happy to have a debate about it. But, I think that you should maybe look into the Euthyphro dilemma, maybe look up divine command theory versus deontology, and actually get an understanding of the philosophy and the difference between a claim and a demonstrated grounding of something.
yeah, awesome. Well, and great interacting with you on that subject. I'm glad that there was somebody here that opposed the things we're saying, so
Sure,
that we could
sure.
flesh it out a little bit. It helps to expand that conversation some. So thanks for
Yeah.
the interaction.
Oh, look, Joe, honestly, morality is probably one of the most complex things we're going to discuss, and none of it is simple. None of it is easy. I think that it's very um it's there's a tendency to go, oh well, it's easy. This is just morality. That's it, and wave it away. But it is such a complex subject, and I think there's a lot of nuance to it, and there's a lot of meta to it, and it is an incredibly complex subject. So I appreciate people have different views on it. At
Sure.
the end of the day, sort of ethics and societal ethics, right? Like what we do in society, it's not a big deal to me if we can just agree on the same things, right?
Right.
There seems to be nothing worse than both agreeing, hey, we shouldn't do this or we should do that, or this is how we should live our lives, and then disagreeing where that comes from and having a massive argument over where it comes from. Does it really matter where it comes from if you agree on it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. The morality argument, both from one point of view, it's like this: you can shut down some morality arguments with very little. But whenever you get into talking about like why do we share these values, that becomes then like human morality becomes this really large topic that has a number of things. And I agree with you completely. And it's a very interesting topic whenever you um, don't try to limit it to because God said so, right? Like whenever you get into the actual whys of things, it gets to be a very big conversation and a good one. So I
Hmm.
hope you guys do talk about it.
Yeah, that would be great. We can just have a discussion if you want. I'm happy to, but you know, moving right like to implement that, you're wondering why, and I'm wondering why Christians have a moral stance on do not kill people, do not murder people, don't treat people well, feed the hungry, clothe the poor, kind of thing, and then the leaders that they have turn around and you know
Yes.
put
When
put
you're
im- put human beings in concentration camps.
yeah.
And
When
I
they're
won't apologize for that. That is what they are. They are concentration camps in El Salvador.
and that's kind of the basis of where this whole conversation started, right? Is because it's like this thing that we're going to sit here and say, oh, we agree, we value this, but then whenever things are done that seem contradictory to that value, like asking why is that the case, and how is it that you continue to say that
Mhm.
you hold this position that clearly you don't actually hold, or
Right.
in practice you don't hold, I guess.
Mm. And one of the things that blows my mind, when I've read the Bible, I've read all the way through the Bible once before. I've only read it once all the way through, but I'm at least familiar with it. And through all of Jesus's do unto others, and feed the hungry, clothe the poor, all of this kind of stuff. Blessed are the meek kind of stuff. You have prosperity gospel.
Oh,
Like how do you get that out of the Bible? Like that if you are successful and have a lot of money, then you're blessed by God. When it seems to be that the New Testament, Jesus' message was exactly. I can understand you getting it out of the Old Testament because it seemed to be, you know, bad things happen to you. Well, God's angry at you, which fair enough. That was sort of a common theme at the time. Back in the Iron Age, if you got boils, God hates you, mate. That's basically it. But how you get that out of the New Testament is beyond me.
yeah.
I even other Christians I've talked to don't understand that. They're like, how do you get the prosperity gospel?
Yeah, no. There's a lot of Christians that see the prosperity gospel stuff as pretty gross. Um, there's been here in recent years, even in the United States, which has a lot of prosperity gospel stuff. There's been more and more Christians pushing back against it and things, and even some people that formerly preached the prosperity gospel leaving it and saying that it was wrong. So, but you know that's everybody's always going to think that, especially whenever it's some deeply held belief system, that theirs is the right one. It's you know
Well,
that
is it, or is it them using the religion to justify, using cherry picked verses and sort of using this stuff to justify something that seems to be completely antithetical to the actual moral values of their own religion?
Oh no, it absolutely is that. that's
Yeah,
that's what it is for sure. I just mean that to the individual, they often don't even get a chance to look at it that way, because how could I be wrong about this thing that I believe so deeply? That's all I
right.
meant. Yeah, yeah. No, I
Uh,
think you're right. I think that explains it perfectly, and kind of what the that's kind of what the whole subject was here today, that I started with, was like, how do you take this thing and use it for this reason when it
right.
doesn't seem that matches that reasoning? Like
Right.
where's how do you get there? And
Well, the problem is that there is no um, sort of empirical methodology for evaluating whether you are getting close to the goal or not. So when your goal is saving souls, or you know glorifying God, I don't, and hey, if you're a Christian, feel free to let me know. But there does not seem to be any kind of way to say, oh, they are the one that is glorifying God or saving souls, and that other person is not. There doesn't, like,
yeah,
if you have two doctors and they disagree on what is actually good for well-being, there is a methodology that, like, basically peer-reviewed publishing of papers and things that we can use to say, hey, which is actually the one or not, right? Like, and I'm not saying it's
right,
perfect, but I'm saying it's better than one dude saying, hey, give me all your money, and that glorifies God and you will get a bounty from the money that you give me, and another guy going, hey, we've got to feed and shelter the poor and feed the hungry. You know, how do we distinguish which one is actually God's will, which one is following God? We can't. All it
Right.
seems to be at that point is one saying, no, they're wrong, I'm right, and the other one saying, no, they're wrong, I'm right. And there seems to be no process whatsoever for telling who's right.
Yeah, and just to add one more thing to that, even if you have two separate methodologies which seem on the surface to be equally sound, it's just as important as who is deciding which one is the better one. Like who's deciding it and why. Like that seems to be important as well. Whereas there's a structure in things like medicine where you have a
Right.
peer reviewed process and all that. Um,
Mm.
or is it just like the the Southern Baptists together have decided that like it's important
Right.
on who's
Right.
deciding.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. And there's different denominations that will claim different things. Yeah, I totally understand. But with the prosperity gospel, you've basically got, as far as I'm concerned, a bunch of people preying on the fear and hope of vulnerable people. Um,
Usually children,
I think, well, children and also sick people, for
sick people.
instance,
Yeah,
who want to be cured. And this was a big thing. I think John Oliver covered it when he did his sort of fake prosperity church that he
yeah,
registered as a tax exempt church. It was called Our Lady of the Perpetual Exemption, and it was absolutely fantastic because he showed that legally you can start a church, tell people that you're going to do everything from make them a millionaire to cure their cancer, take money from them, and that is totally legal, even
yeah,
though he had no power to do that. And he gave examples of where somebody who you know was on medicine, who was sick, was told by these prosperity preachers that they would be cured, and they took their money and they died. Like they did not, they just took advantage of them,
so
right?
my early videos on this channel, that's actually what they were all about, was
Right, right.
how this is a grift, and that telling people that if you get food stamps you better be
Hello,
giving
Joe.
that same amount to the church. And
Joe's been smote. Well, you'd think it'd be me that'd be smoked. Now I've got to entertain you solo, which is always a dodgy proposition. Oh, you're back. You're back. Well done. Well done. Brief trip to hell, or what?
yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
um the what I was saying is that a lot of my early videos I was talking about the grifts and stuff that's done this way, and where they prey on the most uh what's the word,
Vulnerable.
vulnerable. Yes, they prey on the
Yeah.
most vulnerable people in their flock to do it.
Hmm.
They tell the people, like, if you're getting food stamps, you should be tithing that amount in cash back to the church, or you're never going to get
Right.
off them food stamps. Like it's giving
Yes.
false hope to people where it doesn't, uh, where they don't actually have a reason to provide it. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, that's the thing. Like giving money to a church. Look, I totally get it. People give money to communities. They want to support the community. They want to help the community grow. All of that kind of good stuff. I've got no problem with it. But if I have somebody who is on food stamps and is really struggling, I'm not going to say, "Hey, donate to my channel." I'm going to say, "No, you keep that for your food and family." And I don't promise people that, hey, if you give money to me, you're going to reap this massive bounty of wealth that comes back in. Like really, really sort of not promising, but suggesting that's going to happen. And if it doesn't, that's your fault. You haven't been holy enough. You haven't given enough seed to plant. It's
yeah,
your fault.
yeah,
Like if you really want to get your bounty from God, you've got to give all you can.
mm, yeah,
When most of these people will just go through their life hoping that they're going to reap this huge reward, or coincidentally they work really hard and they get somewhere, and then they say, "Well, that was all God."
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think there's I think there's a study to be done there about the people who actually do um, plant those seeds and are able to do that, about where they are in their lives, and how they're able, they're at a point in their lives to where they are able to advance in some way, and then it's an accountability thing, I feel like. But yeah, I think there's an interesting study to be done there about who actually benefits and who doesn't.
Well,
Um,
I think that the framing again, I think it's the church leaders that frame everything good in life is from your God. So,
right.
a lot of the things that people say, hey, this is a blessing in my life, oh, my children are a blessing. Well, atheists have children and they consider it very fulfilling and very, wonderful to have. And they're not thanking a God for it. You may have successes in your life. This is the whole point. Like, it doesn't seem to be the God providing you with it, because people that don't believe in God don't worship God. They don't thank God for this stuff. They don't pray for stuff. They seem to be getting good things as well.
Yeah.
So what is the God actually doing? So how is any of this from God? But their preachers tell them that everything good is provided by God. You've got to pray. You've got to do these things. You've got to do those things. And so I meet these people who think that my life is just a devastating waste how do I live through it? I have a good life. I love my life. It's it's I've got problems. So does everybody else. I their ideas of what atheists are and what we go through is ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Even if I was really poor, I'd probably still enjoy being alive. Like, if I was destitute, like on the street, I'd probably still enjoy being alive. Like, finding good things finding the silver lining is the thing that people do. But they tell them that, hey, you've got to pray, you've got to do these things, and then you'll be blessed. Well, the question is, why are people that are atheists being blessed as well?
Yeah, and there's also people who practice those things that still experience hopelessness. So, I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
uh, both sides. But but yeah, I think, and that's prosperity gospel. That's a big one though. That's
Well,
whenever
that's just one segment. And I
oh
think this
sure,
is such a multifaceted problem, because then you get the people, and I really wanted to, I'm so glad I got to talk to you, Joe, because I really wanted to talk to somebody about this. You get the people that you really suspect that their God belief and the religion belief, they don't really believe in it. It's just a convenient cultural crowbar, right? They get to insert it and sort of go, well, Christianity, this entire civilization is going to be destroyed without Christianity, and I think that that's sort of the Peterson people. For one, that's one segment of them. I think the some of the right wing fundamentalists, say the orthobros and stuff, they don't seem to hold any Christian values, but they will tell everybody that Christianity is necessary for the survival of the civilization.
yeah. No, I agree. I think it's often used that way. Well, if you're gonna view, and this is where, like, well, if you're gonna view that anything and everything good, you're gonna automatically claim that thing is God, and everything bad isn't. I think then, as a theological thing, I would refer back to your own book, to where God says that He makes the good and the evil. The um, God is responsible for both of those. So you know, and what? How do you define that God, and who's defining that God? This borders a lot on a thing that I actually have a little bit of experience with, in like faith based addiction recovery, right?
Right.
Like where it's
Mm.
used as this tool to, like, um, view everything through it. Like you're only able to do these things, and good things are only happening
Right.
because of however you believe in God. And
Mm.
um, eh, when I mentioned accountability a minute ago, I think that's it's really a harmful way to look at things, because especially for someone who is in a vulnerable mental state, or even physical state, I guess, because you're not it's not about just taking accountability for negative things, but you also need to take accountability for the positive things in your life as well. And if you're given that accountability
Mm.
elsewhere, I think maybe you're even more likely to experience that feeling of hopelessness. And
Sure.
so, especially when something does go wrong, you know.
Mm.
So
Yeah, well, I mean, I have all kinds of issues with the religion-based recovery system. I think that sort of um, going into a, well, you have no power over anything. You've got to give up power to some kind of, interdimensional being or whatever you want. It kind of is that, yeah, you really don't want to disempower people at that point. And there's secular therapy has way better results when it comes to addiction, and we sort of talk about having a toolkit to be able to deal with certain situations, because a lot of the time if you're reliant on the religion and reliant on the God kind of thing and reliant on this extra being, if you sort of take that away, or you're not near a church, or you can't, get to other, there's problems there. Whereas modern therapy sort of talks about having a toolkit to be able to have, you know, to be able to deal with these problems as they come up, being reliant on your own knowledge and ability and,
well, yeah,
understanding.
coping was the biggest issue I had whenever
Yeah.
I was in active addiction, was my ability to cope with things in my life,
Yeah.
was what was driving much of it. And a lot of
Mm.
people do that. And one of the talking about addiction, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest issues in addiction is codependence. And the whether that codependence is another person, or whether you've defined a God into existence to be codependent upon.
Right.
I think there's very little difference there. So if it's, I don't think it makes it any better that it's a God that you've chose to use as that other person.
Well, I have mixed thoughts about that. Maybe short term it's actually better,
Sure,
because
you're
like,
you're fulfilling that spot, right?
right, right. You're sort of replacing one addiction with another. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, that's not necessarily bad. But I think that um, people that have replaced their substance abuse with religious abuse, like the religious fervor of that, can be really really freaking dangerous. Some of these people have really distorted worldviews. Like
Sure.
they are like really really dangerous, and we've seen that before. People that think their God has told them to kill a child, or do something terrible. And I will add to our morality conversation, how do you tell them they're wrong, right? Like, if they say, well, God told me to do this, how do you tell them they're wrong? How do you show them they're wrong?
Yeah, it's well, and I think it's the same thing. Like it's very comparable to the other thing, because are you going to practice a faith-based answer to that, or an evidence-based one? And the evidence-based one has statistics and things to go with it to show how effective it is,
Yeah.
whereas the other the same thing, but only it seems to be less effective. In no matter where you apply that tool, I don't think that in the long term the success rates are going to be great, because it's just not a great tool for getting into those bigger questions like that. For somebody who's told those things, I mean, I think the only way that you reach that person is through lots and lots of therapy and conversation, and rational thinking, critical thinking. But often the tools of religion are very anti that. I mean, indoctrination itself is without critical thinking. So it's really hard to get through to somebody and get them to do that whenever
Right.
their whole worldview, their whole life, or at least what's working for them in the short term, tells them not to do that. And
Well,
that's go ahead.
I think that religious therapy, they address the symptom, right? Because what we have found with things like substance addiction is that the substance addiction is a coping mechanism. It's not the actual problem, right?
Not
The
at first.
actual problem, yeah, the actual problem is something a lot deeper, and it's trying to cope with the feelings and the thoughts that you can't cope with, that leads to trying to cover it up with some sort of substance or feel differently with some sort of substance, and it kind of
Or
works at
not feel at all.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, or not feel at all, absolutely. But it does work at first. That's the thing. At first it works. And that's the trap with substance, because you don't feel it, you feel great, this is fantastic, it's an easy fix, it works forever. No, it doesn't. It
Right.
stops working and adds other problems as well. So it's very, very, that's one of the big problems with it. But it's a coping mechanism with things that have happened to you. And so it never, the religious thing, all it does is say, hey, put your faith in God, just feel the God vibes, praise hallelujah, all this stuff. But it's not actually getting at what caused the feelings in the first place that you couldn't cope with, that you then turn to substance to be able to stop those feelings or cope with that thing. And it never gets to there, because
Yeah.
that's not what it's really interested in doing. But I will say it's definitely better than nothing, right? Like, it is, it at least has a community. They're supportive of one another. They talk and do some form of therapy. I don't agree with the whole, well, just put your faith in God, give up your own power and stuff, because I think that people should be empowered. They should be given tools, things, methodologies to be able to cope and continue going, as well as addressing the underlying problems. But it's better than just somebody trying to muscle through it by themselves, solo.
Oh,
Absolutely
absolutely.
better. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, making some sort of progression in a better direction is a better direction. The Whenever you get into the long term of it is where that starts to reflect itself. So for me, the thing was medicated assisted treatment, which is an evidence based care program, and but that medicated assisted treatment wouldn't have been anything without the also therapy and
Yep.
things that went with it. It was those two things together,
Yep.
and yeah, you need to remember that it's not always a singular answer to things,
Right.
So there,
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And I kind of, I really dislike the sort of simplistic way. Like, humans are incredibly complex creatures. We're incredibly complex, and I think that we're sort of understanding that humans aren't really, like, they're kind of five weasels in a trench coat kind of thing. Like, there is a mix of different things happening, and if you ever do schema therapy, you're really talking about the different voices and different parts of your brain. There's stacked layers of your brain, like you talk about the lizard brain, and it's kind of like not actually lizard. It's just a really older part of the cognitive system. Like, it's very fundamental, and then you have sort of higher cognitive processes stacked on top of it. It's wild. Humans are incredibly complex, and just sort of saying, "Hey, here's the quick, easy fix." Well, it may work, but it may not, because we're not. There's no quick, easy fixes to this stuff. A
yeah,
broken human is not just, there's no quick and easy fix to that.
yeah. And it's not usually quick and easy that you got there, to begin with.
Right, right,
Yeah,
exactly, yeah. And
so
this whole idea that humans are worthless sinners that are as rags, and you're really telling people that they're except for the grace of God, you're just worthless, is just so harmful to people.
Yeah.
I don't, people talk like that, and I'm like, no, no.
That's what I was raised in. That's the Southern Baptist
Yep.
stuff that I was raised in. Absolutely every day at church, it was how you
Mm.
don't deserve any of this, and you're an awful, dirty human being, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, yeah. Some of the exact words you said kind of had a bit of I don't want to say nostalgia, kind of
Trigger there.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Little,
Yeah,
no,
no,
it's good.
I completely reject that idea. I think that, and the idea that there's some people that are inherently evil. I don't think that's a thing. I think that, when we're talking about evil people, I mean, we can talk about psychopathy, right? Like, you have no sense of empathy, and they, seem pretty evil because they just do not seem to understand nor care what other people are feeling. It's not that they're evil. Like, they still have that cognitive empathy. They can still go, oh yes, I can understand how, but they can't feel what you're feeling. There's something missing there. There's nothing evil about them. In fact, psychopaths can be very, very helpful in society. They're not risk averse. They don't really care about risk. That can be incredibly helpful. But one
Yeah,
thing we do not do is take our moral cues from psychopaths, right? They
right.
get a bad rap. They get a really bad rap. But psychopaths aren't necessarily bad people. They can be fine, upstanding members of society that are fantastic, but we don't take our moral cues from them because they
Right.
can't feel how other people feel.
Right, because people are more than the one thing that may be associated with them, right? Like, there's a
Mm.
collection of different things that make a person what they are. Just because you're
Right.
missing one of those things doesn't mean everything about you is necessarily,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and I think that celebrating neurodiversity is one of the best things that society has ever done. Like, going, well, you're autistic, but there's other things you can offer. Is a fantastic attitude to have. The diversity of thought we've got by acknowledging, hey, there's these neurodivergent people that don't, their brains don't operate normally, like in a normative sort of, this is how brains operate way, but that's actually a strength, not a weakness. That's
right,
actually good. Like I said, psychopaths can be incredibly valuable, as say a firefighter, for instance, or medical personnel. It seems antithetical, but if you've got an emergency responder, somebody that can do their job without worrying about who's upset or what people are going through, is actually incredibly valuable. They
right,
will just do stuff without really caring that there's a guy over there bleeding to death, and horrible. In certain situations, they're fantastic, right? Like business leaders, they're fantastic. The problem comes that we start to listen to them for end goals, and it may not be the best to do.
yeah. It's the application of it, right?
Right.
The yeah. I agree. Um, yeah. Well, let's land this plane, I guess. I think that's as good.
I'm happy to talk more, but if you want to wrap up, it is your show. I will
Well,
grant you that.
the only reason I'm wrapping up is because I got a kid that has to go to bed here in a minute.
Oh, fair call, fair
Yeah.
call. Oh, Joe, it's so I could talk to you for ages, my friend.
E-
I really
Every
could.
time we do this, that's how this ends. Is it's like, okay, we're gonna have to stop. We could just keep doing this for hours because I would talk to you for another 2 hours. The absolutely. The You and I always seem to have great conversations, and
Hmm.
we you know we drop in on each other, say hi, and we're always friendly with each other. But we don't always get to sit down and really talk with each other. And
I think our schedules are just slightly off, Joe. I
yeah,
find this with a lot of people that I'd really love to watch more. That um, my schedule's off and I can't drop in on them as much as I want, kind of thing. Like,
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I stream in the middle of your night, like in the wee or
yeah.
early morning hours.
Yeah, I really want to see politicality, but it's like 2 in the morning or something, and I'm like, Joe, I love you, man, but I don't love you that much.
Yeah,
Like I'm really, I think that if I watched everybody that I wanted to on YouTube, all of the community that I wanted to, I would seriously be on a night shift. You know, I'd be like overnight and then sleeping during the day kind of thing, which I can't do. So
well,
yeah,
I think that's why I value these conversations so much more, is because we don't get to do
mm,
it all the time, and so not that I wouldn't, but but
yeah,
yeah, definitely one of my favorite people to sit down and talk with, Mark, and you and I, we always. It doesn't matter where we start at kickoff. We always end up just having a really great conversation, and I appreciate that.
well, maybe you can come on my channel next, like over my place next, mate. You know, and we'll pop out. And I think one of the things that I do want to talk about at some point is not just um, sort of what is happening with the Christian far right nationalists, but what are we going to do about it? Like, you know, because that seems to be the side that we're lacking. You know, how do we handle this? Um, because there seems to be a Christian to alt right pipeline
Yeah,
that is, you know, at this point it's a massive pipeline, just, you know, drawing people in and convincing them that brown people are non-Christian, and, you know, this has to be a Christian country and stuff. And um, I wonder how we actually get back to the sort of liberal value of freedom of religion, freedom of you know, bodily autonomy, you know, all of these values that in actually made America great. You know, like
yeah. I feel like, unfortunately, that, um, and I'm not saying the left as a whole or liberalism necessarily embodies this, but unfortunately, it's kind of been let it work itself out, and that hasn't been so great. That hasn't been their, you know, they what I see from the left is the left wants to promote progressive ideals until it's time to get those swing voters in, and then it's like we're all going to shift towards the middle and not actually do anything about the real problems that are causing all of this. So
mm,
that's a complicated question. I think, um, as in what should we do and what can we realistically do, may not be exactly the same.
right.
And hopefully, hopefully, what I hope, as far as in the political spectrum, is that the left uses this opportunity while the right is so unpopular to drag that window back to the left, because it's constantly moved right and right and right. And
Yes.
now being the least little bit progressive is seemed as is is treated as an extreme position. Whenever, what does progressive mean? I mean, that.
Mm,
So hopefully they use that to drag it back to the left as the right tries to move away from the unpopular positions towards the middle. Um,
mm,
but whether that's what they actually do or not, I don't know. When it comes time to do the voting and things, the left tends to kind of move back towards the middle too, which I understand statistically. But how has that affected things now? And we see that it's been a bad way to handle it, of just letting it work itself out. It's not been a good way to uh, to address the problems that we have.
mm. Yeah. Well, I think there's sort of a hidden culprit in this right wing sort of fascistic swing, and that is the corporations and them not upholding their moral responsibility and their ethical responsibility in society. business ethics is a thing, but they seem to lately have abandoned them for what is popular. And I think that a lot of these companies and corporate entities have to be held accountable for not just enabling this, but also largely contributing to it. While
Well,
like it's actually very insidious because what I see them doing is capitulating to this you know far right swing, but still keeping enough distance for deniability. Oh, we didn't
yeah.
approve
Well,
of this.
I would actually argue that the corporations are your psychopath from the previous conversation.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, I
and,
mean, yeah, if they were a person, absolutely, but they're not they don't have any.
right.
Um, they're
But
not a
in the United
person.
States, we treat them as if they are.
Oh
And,
yeah, I know.
so, yeah,
Citizens
um,
United kind of stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
that is ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
yeah. But yeah, no, I think that there's again that there's a lot to talk about there about where that's how do you escape this awful place we're in, and what tools do you use to do it? I think is a great
Mhm.
conversation. Um, I think obviously, this community and stuff feels like that, speaking up is one of those tools about various things and stuff. Not to mention, like, I do the ARC protest thing, which is coming up in
Yeah,
July, and
yeah.
that's why I do that thing, partially
Mm,
anyway, is because I think that is one of the ways that we improve those things is by going out and, first of all, putting those people on notice that you see these things and that you have a problem with them, and that's why things
mm.
like the No Kings protests and stuff have been really effective as far as letting people know that a huge portion of us don't agree with what's going on
Right,
and what's happening.
right.
Uh, so so yeah,
And
I mean, I
yeah.
think there's a lot there.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Joe, it's fantastic talking to you, man. We got so many topics. I really want to talk to you again. So don't be shy. I'm glad you reached out. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I think the community's fantastic. I really do. I love all of you. You keep me honest. You keep me sane. It's wonderful to see you all.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I feel the same way. I love having you on, Mark, and any chance I get to sit on and talk to you, I'd love to. Um, Deviant Outcast, thank you for dropping the command there. There's Mark's channel in the chat, Mark Reid Atheism.
Oh, thank
Definitely,
you.
if you don't know, if you're here and you don't know who Mark Reid is, you've been missing out. I'm more in your hours of the day for operating now, anyway. So I would say more of your crowd is here than the daytime crowd that you don't see it.
Possibly, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, go over and check out Mark. Mark and Ember get together from Better Than Ember and do some really great
Hmm.
debate dissection things, and I love those, especially whenever. Speaking of nostalgia earlier, especially whenever you get into some of the old Hitchens and stuff like that, I love to see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
We've been doing newer stuff recently. I must admit that's been my fault rather than Ember's. There's just been a few that are, I think that I really love Alex O'Connor. There's plenty of things that I disagree with him on, but I do like his debate style. He's intellectual. He doesn't, he's got the that sort of Hitchens way of doing really hard hits, but he does it in such a graceful way. It doesn't seem like he's being mean at all. I think he's really good. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. But don't get me wrong, I love the old ones as well. It's just we've been doing it that long. We've been doing it over 3 years now, I think.
yeah,
That like we've sort of the older ones. I think we've covered most of the big old debates kind of thing that Hitchens has had and
sure.
Matt Delahunty has had and things like that. So yeah, but always interesting. Yeah, I also do a is God the Arsehole on Tuesday nights Eastern time. which is basically we're going through Genesis in the Bible at the moment. We're just about to move on to Exodus, but basically, if God did a Reddit post to is am I the arsehole, would he be an arsehole? And so far, the consensus is absolutely, like the biggest prick in the history of the world, quite frankly. And
Yeah.
it's actually amazing. I'm learning a lot by going through the Bible. I think that atheists should do, secular Bible studies because you learn a lot. I did not know how inbred Abraham's family was.
Oh
I had
yeah.
no idea. Their family tree is a stump. It's incredible. Um, and I also do fundamentalist fails where I review Christian videos, usually with a bit of a lightheartedness. They're usually pretty absurd. Last week we did Ray Comfort kind of thing, so just all the absurdity of fundamentalist Christians coming out. But yeah, that's basically me. I'm always looking for debates, though, always looking for discussions. So I'm so glad you reached out, and we will do it again, Joe. I'll have you over, and maybe I can do your time. I can get up in the middle of the night or something,
Uh,
get a coffee, and
you do you can I can work around you. Just I just have to have a heads up is all. That's it, and I can make it happen. Um, the but yeah. Uh, and speaking of which, the is God the asshole thing. I
yeah.
think you can go even into the Gospels and apply that to Jesus quite often. The acts of Jesus are often considered to be these great, wonderful things, but when you look at them as they're literally written, maybe they're not so good. But
Maybe. I mean, that's a long while. Like people have said you should do two a week or you're never going to get to the New Testament. It's like, well, I mean, look, I'm just doing me. I'm fitting in where I can, how I can. So,
yeah,
I'm open to suggestions, but yeah, I don't think at the moment I'm gonna double up on them. I don't know. I don't
I
know.
just whenever you get there, I don't think you have to be in a rush to
Yeah,
do
yeah. No,
it.
I don't think so either. I think I'm just cruising. Like it's actually my channel's been going. I mean, I haven't had that like surge at all where I've just suddenly taken off, but at the same time, it's slowly just accruing numbers. People are liking my stuff. I get engagement. It's just been nice. It hasn't been a rapid growth, but it's solid growth every month. So I'm happy for that. I'm happy at
Yeah.
where I am. I'm happy at what I'm doing. So I always go, oh, I should do more, but I'm doing the best I can, and I think that's all anybody can do. If there was any better I could do, I would be doing it.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I agree. And that's kind of my experience with it too here lately. It's been steadily growing, and I'm happy with that. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a lot more rewarding to build your way there on many things than just have one video or two videos or whatever that takes off
hmm
and does it. I always felt a bit of guilt that like the first half of my subscribers there for a long time were all from two videos. Yeah.
mm.
Anyway, go check out Mark. I'll be back Sunday with Lil for Politicality at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. It was great interacting with the chat. Thanks for the super chats and the memberships and all that stuff, guys. I appreciate having you, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Thanks so much, everybody. Bye bye.